Today on In the Wood Yard, we're going to talk about drying firewood. Where is the best place to put your wood to dry your wood and why? Here we go. So I get asked all the time, Chris, where should I stack my wood? Should I stack it next to the house? Should I stack it out in an open field? Should I put it in the wood? Should I lean it against a tree? Should I put it on blacktop? Should I put it on gravel? People want to know where to put the wood and why they should put it there. So my tips are, number one, put it in the best place you possibly can. So we're going to talk about what those things are. Now, for those of you that maybe are new to the channel, don't know me or what I do, I've been cutting wood now for 50 years. I'm almost 60, and when I was a little kid, my job was to carry the wood after my dad cut it, split the wood and stack the wood, and we heated with wood my whole life pretty much. So I've been burning wood for a very long time, whether it's for heating in the house, fireplace, fire pit backyard, camping, and for the last 8 years or so I've been selling wood, and I sell hundreds of cords of wood a year. So I have a little bit of experience, not saying I know everything, but I do know a little bit. So that's what we're going to talk about today. I'm going to talk about all the things that I've learned while doing firewood. Now, the best way, in my opinion, is in an open area like you see behind me here. That is east, that is west, that is south, that is north. We have prevailing winds out of the west most of the time. So whether you stack your wood in rows that run east and west or north and south, I don't think really matters that much. What matters is there's enough space for the air to flow through. Now today, there's almost no wind. I just barely can feel a little bit of wind. There's a flag behind the camera on a flagpole there. It's not moving, it's perfectly still. But I went and I collected some dandelion fuzz, and there's a little bit of thistle here too. Watch what happens when I let go with this. Ooh, look at that, it's going that way. Let's just see what happens here. Oh, that stuff's flying that way now. So there's no wind today. I don't feel any wind, but that piece now is 10 feet away, 15, 20, 30. It's flying fast now. So there is a little bit of a breeze. This stuff here, oh look, it's coming right towards the camera. There's a breeze today even though there's no wind. So there's constant airflow. Air is always moving. Even if it's dead calm, there's still some air movement. Oh, that stuff I let go is 50 feet away, 50 yards there. It's moving now. Oh, now I feel a little bit of a breeze. So there's always airflow. So whether your air is flowing across the wood between your rows, like you see here, this is an area here where you can see is open so the air can flow through here like an alley, or whether you run your rows north and south so that you're getting the edges of the wood to get hit by the wind. Both good. I don't know that it matters that much either way. I mean, it might make a little difference. You could do some experiments. There might be a 1% difference. I don't know. All I know is in the open. Now, the reason this is such a good spot is because this is wide open over here. You can see over to the next building over there. All this is open. There's no woods around here. So this literally gets sun. Say there's daylight for 16 hours in a day this time of year. And of those 16 hours, this wood is getting sun on it for probably 15. You've got your half hour before the sun rises and your half hour as it sets that you're not getting direct sunlight on it. But if the sun is out, it's hitting the wood. So that's the best, in my opinion. I think it's even better than a wood shed, because in a wood shed, it's covered, so you're not getting the sun hitting it. And a lot of times in wood sheds, you've got 1 or 2, sometimes even 3 sides that are enclosed, unless you've got open slats on it. And a lot of times your wood sheds are so deep or wide that you're packing the wood in pretty tight. So if you want to dry wood fast, this I think is the best. The only thing I could do better would be to have single rows. If you had single rows, you'd have pieces that are your 16 or whatever size you cut your wood, 18, 20, 12, whatever size is in your area that is common or legal, whatever you guys do. You'd have it that wide, and you'd have sun and wind hitting it from all sides, and stacking it as high as you can reach would be a benefit. The higher you go, the more wind there is, the more sun's going to hit it. So those are things to consider. By getting your wood in an open area is huge. Now that's for the drying purposes. Now to keep it dry, a woodshed, because you've already had it out in your drying area, but then again, you're moving it. You're taking it from your area where you dried it out in the field, wherever, and you bring it into your woodshed, which a lot of times is next to a boiler or a wood stove right next to your house, so that you can easily access the wood when you need it. So that's something to think about. But in a woodshed, it's not going to dry as good as it is out in the open. I could be wrong, I could be stupid, but that's just my opinion, that's my beliefs. Now, one of the other things to think about is, if you notice the wood behind me right here, none of it is covered yet, because this was just cut and split this past end of winter, this load right here. There's a truckload of oak that I got, and I leave it uncovered all spring, all summer, all fall. So I get 3 seasons, spring, summer, fall, where the wood is being hit by the sun and wind at all times. Yes, rain gets on it, but the rain actually doesn't penetrate as far as you think. It usually only goes the first couple layers and it runs off. But I do cover it in the fall of the year, just before winter, because I want to keep the snow off of it. And I've mentioned this in other videos. The reason I want to keep the snow off of it is because you get freeze and thaw cycles quite often in the wintertime. So your snow on the top, so you get a foot of snow, it's constantly being hit by sun. Even on cool days where it's below freezing, that sun still can hit the edges of it, and the snow will melt, turn into water, it'll run down into the wood, and it'll turn into a wood sickle. And you will have a block of wood and ice eventually by the end of winter. So that's why I cover it, because I'm selling this. When I go to sell it, I want to pull the tarp off, pull the tin off, pull the siding, the plastic, whatever I've got covering, I want to pull it off, and it's dry and ready to go. So that's what I do. I'm going to show you some more options and talk about some other areas right now. So now another thing to think about when you're drying wood is, besides having a big open area like this where the sun and wind can hit it, is to get it off of the ground. You can see I've got my wood on pallets. This is a full cord section right here, and right here is another full cord. I separate it with a pallet so that it can get some wind, and so I know that's the separating mark. So this is a 2 full cord row, and this row right behind it here is actually 3 full cords. So right here is a full cord, right there's a full cord, and there's another full cord. And then I got more rows, more rows, more rows all through the wood yard like this. The reason I like the pallets is because they still breathe. You've got open slats there, holds it up. As you can see, I got a whole bunch of them here where I've got the pallets. I just got a brace on the end. But this wood is drying very fast. I believe that wood that is stored out in the open or in a field like this will probably dry twice as fast as wood that is in a shaded area, and we're going to go over there next. So right here underneath my splitting wedge in this chain I have is a stump that's about a 24, maybe 26 inch stump. This used to be a not a cottonwood tree, an aspen tree right here. And I cut it down because I wanted to make more shade, because this area right here was shaded all day long. Because of this tree, and there's a tree right there, and there's a tree over there, and there's a tree over there, and there was one back over there. And I cut it down because I wanted my wood to dry faster. You can see this one's always starting to grow back up, so I gotta kill this thing off, and I'm eventually gonna grind this stump out of here because it's a big one. But yeah, you wanna get it so that there's sun and wind hitting your wood as much as possible. Now we're gonna go back this way into the woods where I've got some wood that is covered most of the time. And right here's a stump. There's an old stump right there. So this used to be a tree. I cut it down so all this wood can get sun most of the day. Now because I'm close to this woods right here, in the afternoon when the sun goes down over there, because that's west, this becomes shade. So this does not get as much sun as the area out there, and I don't get as much wind flow back here because you got all these trees, and you can see, if you look at the leaves right there, they're just barely moving. But if you look up there, the leaves are moving a lot more, and that's because there's more wind up there, because this is all being blocked because there's woods for cutaways here. So we're going to come back over here into the shade area, as I call it. Now the only time this area right here, as you can see there's shade in here, the only time this area right here gets any sun is first thing in the morning, because that is east. So in the morning I will get some sun right here. But this wood here is all 1.5 years old now, so I know it's dry. And it was wood that was kind of wood that dries fast. It's basswood, so I know that it dries very fast. But as you can see by looking up, this is very shaded in here. This gets very little sun here, and it gets very little wind because of all the woods going this direction. There's really not much airflow. There's a little bit of airflow through here, but not too much. So this doesn't get too much sun or or wind, so that's important to look for. Now over here, I had this pile. I stacked it over here because I was running out of room and I really didn't want to put it here, but it's the only place I had. And it's again under trees. So this gets till about, noon, 1 o'clock or so. I mean, I guess this gets sun until about noon or 1 o'clock or so. And this pile used to come way out to here. So I've sold all this wood here. And then I built my big cookie bin here. And that's on pallets and it's enclosed so it can breathe, but that's just all cookies in there. And I'm going to come down over this way. So we're going to talk about another spot where I cut a bunch of trees down. This next spot is an area along the edge of my property that used to have trees that were really shaded in here. Now, when I first started my firewood business, my firewood started just past that little tree there. That's a little walnut tree. And it went down over to the end of where this wood isn't stacked. I had all my wood right here, and I had a little bit of wood right along here. That was it. It was all hidden back here. But the problem is if you look here, there's a couple small trees, and there used to be 4 or 5 trees right here, and there was 5 or 6 trees right along the edge here, and they were all box elders. And for those of you that know anything about box elders, they grow to the light. And so this is the light area. That was all woods back there. So those trees literally were at an angle probably like this, like, 30, 40 degrees. They were like really arched over, and as they grew, they were getting lower and lower and lower, covering all this wood. So I cut them down because I want the sun and the wind to hit this wood back here so that it dries faster. So if you've got a place to put wood, but there's a lot of shade, you might want to eliminate some trees. I did it because I've got volume. I've got, like I said, hundreds of cords of wood, and I need the space, and I want it spread out as much as possible to dry, because that's what is important for me for the wood, is to make sure it dries fast. So another thing, well, 2 things to think about: going higher. The higher you go, like these here, this is probably getting, I don't know, it's probably 6.5, almost 7 feet high. And I went high because there was so much wood here that I had to go high because I couldn't come out any farther from a truckload that I had. But then here, this is just a 4-foot high stacked, these 2 full cords here. So going higher will help a lot too. Now, another thing to think about is that if you're stacking your wood up against a building, that one side against the building is not getting any sun, it's not getting any wind. And especially if you're doing multiple rows along the edge of a building, those inside rows are not getting hardly any wind or any sun at all. So that's something to think about. Now, if you've got wood that's already dry and you want to stack it close to where you want to access it, next to your garage, back of the house, and you're stacking in an area where there's an eaves troughs or a soffit that's covering it, that's a good spot if your wood is already dry, because it doesn't need to dry anymore. You just want to keep it dry. So that's something to think about. So up against the building is not a good thing, and I know that. Yes, I know that because I had problems one year. It was when I was first starting, when I first got married years ago. I would cut it, split it, stacked it right up against the garage. Then I put another roll, and I put some plastic over it. Well, the inside row never really dried. And by the time we got to that, it was kind of the end of winter, and that wood was still wet. I mean, it burned, but not good. So that was experience the hard way. So I'm just telling you this so that you don't make those mistakes. So I mentioned this before, but as you can see, my wood is all off the ground. It is all stored on pallets so that it's not touching the ground, no ground contact. And like I said before, I have seen videos that guys have had on YouTube, and I've talked to people, they think, oh, just throw it in a pile on the ground, it'll be fine. Yeah, your top wood's gonna dry, your middle wood will still get dry, with that stuff on the ground, not so much. If it's your own wood and you're not selling it, go ahead, let it rot, I don't care. But if you're selling it, you're making a bad name for all of us. Make sure you get it off the ground and get it dry. Now, if you're on rock, actual rock, like gravel or bigger stones or rock, yeah, then you probably don't need to get it off the ground. Like, there are people that do wood professionally. Skidder Kev is one of the guys. He's got a YouTube channel, you should check it out. He has his in a wood yard, and they have their wood in big, huge peaked piles. And their piles are so high and so peaked that the water actually sheds off of it and it runs off the wood. and they don't have to worry about it so much. They season their wood for a full year, and they turn their wood. They actually take machines and roll it over and move it around. So that's something you got to think about. But for the average person, you don't want it on the ground. Now here's an example. This is wood that I cut and split about a month ago, and it's got to get off the ground. So that's one of my projects I'm going to be working on. Here's the first half of it that I've already got stacked. I got it off the ground and on pallets, and it's drying nicely now, as you can see. And this is all cherry. The good thing is that cherry dries pretty fast, and actually the stuff that's on the top of this pile right here, as I'm stacking, I can tell it's dry. But down on the bottom, it's wet. It's actually wet. Not moldy yet, because it's only been here for like a month or so, but it needs to get off the ground now. So this is one of my projects I'm going to be working on actually today. Later today, I'm going to be stacking this. You'll see that video probably tomorrow. So that's one that's coming up. So get your wood off the ground, get it stacked on either some type of a stringer, so you got boards down, the wood is off the ground, or on pallets. Get it off the ground. That's important. And then the other thing, like I mentioned, is covering your wood when it gets to either if you're in a real rainy area where you get tons of rain. See here on the northwest part of the United States, when you guys get rain 23 hours a day every day, you might want to cover your wood, the top at least, because you guys stuff gets wet all the time. Sometimes we'll go a week or two without any rain. Sometimes we'll have rain 3-4 days in a row, but then we'll go a month sometimes without rain. So it's not an issue for us so much. And the rain, like I said, does dry fast, but the inside of the wood is what you want to get dry. So get it off the ground, get it stacked, get it in an open area. If you're putting it in a wood shed, just remember it's going to take a little longer to dry because the top is covered and you're packing it in there pretty tight, because a lot of wood sheds are deep. Many rows, so that wood might take a little longer to dry. Unless you're putting it in there already dry, then you're probably good. But get it in the open, let the sun and the wind do its thing. The big thing a lot of people don't think about with drying wood is time. It takes time. It's not something that just happens overnight. You can do everything you can to get it cut, split, stacked off the ground, get the airflow, let the sun hit it, but it's not going to happen overnight. It's not going to happen in a week. Probably not even a month. Some of the woods that dry faster are like aspen, cottonwood. Cherry dries pretty fast, soft maple dries pretty fast, pine dries real fast. 3 months, 4 months. If you're drying it during the summer months where the sun is hitting it, it's hot, the wind is blowing, so it'll dry. But if you're cutting it in the fall when it's rainy, or in the spring and you need it right away, it's going to take some time. It might take a lot longer. So your better woods take longer to dry, so you got to think of that. And the smaller you split it, the faster it'll dry. I want my wood this size, and a lot of people ask me this all the time. Why do I have the wood the size that I do? Like, to me, this is like an ideal size right here. I can pick it up with one hand. It's not a big all-nighter. It's not a piece that a lot of guys that heat with wood, they want them that size. They want them bigger. But I have them these sizes because my customers want this size. That's what they like. So that's what I sell them. So anyway, I think that's all I got to say for today. That's it. Thanks for being here. You know what to do. Hit the like, the subscribe, the share buttons, do all that good stuff. And tomorrow I'm going to be back in the wood yard, and we're going to do some work. We're going to be stacking some wood. It'll be fun. Come on back. Between now and then, get outside, get cutting. Good night, Irene.